We moved to the UK because my dad's business partner got kidnapped and burnt. So, you know, we were very happy. You know, Dad was successful. You know, we had everything. There was no need for us to. And then that happened, and you know, obviously, around that time, Pakistan was getting really unsafe. You know, especially if you're successful. So the other business partners, there was four. So you know, the other three all left. We went to Saudi Arabia for a pilgrimage. Then we stopped off in the UK to see my uncle, and we were going to head to Canada like the other two partners, and we ended up staying here. So the way we ended up here wasn't really planned, and yeah, a little bit unfortunate really. You know, we took asylum, and then we were in a hotel. You know, I have very vague memories of that. You know, every week there'd be like a list of people that would be housed and stuff, and you'd be just, you know, you'd be coming down reading, we're looking for your name and stuff. You know, my other uncles and stuff, they still live in London. So, you know, you spend time. But then I just remember 9/11. You know, 9/11 happened not long after. And, you know, before that and after that, there was just a complete switch. You know, and then we were moved to Barnsley, Halloween that year. And then you notice it even more. You know, my dad had a long beard, and you know, I guess that's the first experiences of not feeling welcomed or being different. You know, initially when I used to be called the P word, and you know, in our culture, it's actually a really nice word. So like, you know, thought that's what we're being called. But you know, then you start to obviously learn and educate yourself, and you learn about the history. I think I find it quite staggering even now when I speak to people about the history of the P word. A lot of people still don't really know why the P word is derogatory and racist, which I find quite staggering, really. So, you know, just learning all of that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there was like a flick of a switch, and I think it happened again. I'm sure we'll go later on around Brexit. You know, there was that first few months, and then flick of a switch, and then, you know, I felt like things were getting better, and then Brexit was just like the point at which you felt like, right, it's just giving everyone a free rein to just say whatever they want, and quite frankly be racist and have no accountability. Cricket initially was actually a great way to integrate into society for me, because my cricket club was next to my school, and I was excelling from pretty early on, and I had the same lads I played cricket with at the club or in my school year. So, you know, initially it was actually quite a nice way to have an identity or integration. I captained the Yorkshire under 15. I'd already captained England under 15 before this, so captaincy was something that came natural to me. You know, I captained again Rooty, Joe Butler, Ben Stokes. So, you know, I'd already captaincy was something I'd done. So it wasn't like, for me, when I first got to do it at under 15, that felt special. You know, someone to think that you could captain. But you know, I didn't see at that time. You know, I didn't see it as like a massive thing of, you know, South Asian. But also, although when I captained the Yorkshire first 11, and I was the youngest ever Yorkshire captain and the first of South Asian, British South Asian, that was special. But that was a bit further when I was 20. Look, I've been very confident. You know, I never drank, didn't go out. I was, you know, very strong on my religion. And then I saw a fellow player from the same community as me, you know, and he was doing all of that, and you know, how the way he was respected, the opportunities. And I don't even think it was consciously. I think subconsciously, I just fell into that trap, and I started drinking, going out, and you know, I started getting opportunities. Then I got to captain. You know, I was like, you know, this is brilliant. But then, you know, I did really well performing, got picked for the England Lions, and then I had a bit of a, you know, I knew it wasn't me. You know, so then I started to really struggle with what my, you know, because I was here as a Muslim guy, and I'm going out drinking and stuff, but even then, you know, I was out drinking, and my teammates are coming up, oh, don't talk to him, he's a PE, you know, he's not Sheikh, he's got no oil, don't talk to him, you know. So it was.
They thought it was banter.
Yeah, but you know, even when I was, even when I was trying to fit in, I felt worthless, and but this was happening. As I look back now, I think it's staggering that I didn't say anything at the time, because I was being called the P word from people who worked to the ground, people in local bars and stuff. So it wasn't just like, because my teammates were doing it so openly, it was like everyone was doing it. And then I started to really struggle with the fact that I was doing that. I didn't know where I stood. I didn't know identity, and then my mental health suffered a lot. I started taking antidepressants, and I've been taking antidepressants since 2013, and on and off, and it's for a long period of that I didn't even know what it was that was affecting me. I got pinned down, that happened, I didn't say anything at the time, and I raised this stuff with Yorkshire, and then I spoke about this, I think in November 2020, just before my first interview with Squire Patton Boggs on the day. And one of the witnesses got in touch, texting me, I was there and all this, and I witnessed it and said who did it and everything, right? All this happened. And I was put through this process by police, by ECB, and I had written proof, I had, and I had proof that they were lying, all of this. And it took 2 or 3 of me pushing before it got to a point where they could not get to a point that they had to accept that this took place. And everything was tried. The press tried to undermine it, all of it. And I've got clear messages to prove that it happened and all that stuff. So this whole this bit's been the most difficult, because but at the time, as a young 15-year-old, I'm just thinking, if I'd have gone and told my dad, I'd have never played cricket again. And that's the one thing, people say to you, oh, why didn't you say it at the time, or why didn't you raise it up then?
You're 15.
I was 15, and this bloke is an ex-professional cricketer, so and where do you go? Where do you go? I wouldn't have played cricket again. Dad wouldn't let me, right? And also, what's shown now, when I spoke out, with having achieved something in the game, how I've been treated. Imagine me speaking to a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old. No one would have even known, or it wouldn't have even probably got past the local newspaper editor. Late 2017, I spoke to a board member, someone from our community champion, OBE, he mentioned it himself, so we spoke to him. He said, oh, do you want me to take it further? Like, not yet, we want to see what happens. Then, we had the pregnancy, which was hard, tough, and then I feel like I got treated so horribly through that, just because I'd raised complaints of bullying and then racism. And the way I was treated around that pregnancy and the loss of my son, when people try and defend the other side, I say to them, that's what you're defending. And it was inhuman. But subject access request, to this day, I've never put any of them documents into the public domain. And I could have done it on day one, but if I do that, none of these people will ever work again. It's horrific, it's vile.
You've got those documents?
I have got email conversations of HR, Director of Cricket, CEO, Board Chair, my personal development manager, who I thought was on my side, the board member, the Asian board member. I've got all of this. So when people, it makes me laugh when people say, oh, he's just been believed. We've just taken one person's word at gospel.
Why aren't you publishing?
There was an independent investigation which was rigged against me, but had no chance to vindicate me. Equality Human Rights Commission has looked at it and said, likely unlawful activities taking place. They haven't just done it. DCMS, the ECB investigation, the CDC, all of this has happened, yet I've got people. So what do I could have had a body cam footage at this time, and you've got some commentators, some high profile commentators, still, I heard a phrase recently where a lie turned into the truth, and now the truth can't, be turned back into a lie. And I'm like, wow, and why I'm not doing it, I'm actually not doing it to protect them individuals.
What allegiance do you have to them?
Light
is the best disinfectant.
But you know, my view has always been is right. They are actually as as much of a victim of the institution as I am, because that institution is, once we go into individuals, and I've tried to stay away from individuals throughout this, it was that independent investigation from Yorkshire, because they were so scared of institutional racism that they pushed it onto individuals. Most of these individuals came into the environment as 14, 15 and have been shown this is the way to behave and it's fine, right?
So they've been groomed.
They've been groomed into that, and not all of them. Yes, some of them are horrific. Some people, some of the things that they've tried to do to me, if I had a bit, I have tried to make this throughout my, is to make sure that any decision that I make doesn't damage the cause in a negative. And I feel like, I just want things to get better. And I don't feel like putting them documents out is going to make things better. And that's why I haven't to this day. But I am human. There has been days where I've been like, what am I doing? Why am I allowing these people to continuously, cause harm to me, my family, and people that support me? Whereas, if I put this out, they quite frankly would forget work again. They'd find it difficult to show their face in places. But it might help me, but does that help the cause? And I'm not sure it does. And I've not come to that decision. I don't think it does. And that's why I've sort of kept away from it. Well, firstly, through the pregnancy, I was at training and I got a phone call, we can't find a heartbeat, right? So I run home, suddenly I'm getting, comments, like the coach made the comment, oh, it'll be fine, everything's fine. Like, I'm literally like shit, like really in fear and stuff. I didn't want to go to the pre-season tour. There was a lot of pressure put on me to go there. In the end, I stayed strong. The week leading up to when we lost him, I got taken up to Durham when there was all this going on at home in the thing that I would be playing. I was leading wicket taker for the county a year before, second in the country. I went up there and didn't play me. So then I was like, why have I been brought up here? That night, that appointment my wife had that day was, if that had have gone differently and some things had have been checked, possibly my son would still be here. Who knows? I have that guilt inside me. I'll carry that with myself. I didn't go to that, on that Saturday night, more than likely, or during that point between that time and Sunday, my son had his last breath. So, all of that. And then, basically, I had one player. I'd been at the club, I'd grown up at the club, one player that came to support me while I carried my son from the hospital to graveyard.
Just what?
One person,
Out of the whole club?
Out of the whole club. These people my mum's cooked food for them, they've stayed at my house, one person. That hurt.
White? South Asian?
White, but he'd had a personal tragedy recently, and top person came.
That humanity.
And that's my.
Show that humanity.
And then around that, then they used the loss of my son to get rid of me because I'd raised bullying and racism the year before. And the way they used it, and that when people defend them, if there's any points where I get really angry, is that when them behaviors were just inhuman. Inhuman, there is no excuse for that whatsoever. And that's one of the reasons I spoke out, to get to some answers for that. And unfortunately, I try and stay away from using strong language for individuals, but unfortunately the director of cricket, when I left, the director of cricket clearly didn't have the courage to get in a room and just help a human being who'd gone through such a trauma to explain why he might have behaved that way. And then on the evening that I left, his wife and daughter were abusing me on Twitter. And so, when people try and defend these, because there's been so much thrown into the mix in all of this, the real crux of the, horrible behaviors that these people and the experiences these people put me through just has no defense. I left, I handed my keys to my father. I said, I'm leaving the country, I'm never coming back. I lost all faith in humanity. I didn't want to come back. I said to my wife, we're going. We went to Pakistan. You know, we were there 7 months. It was tough. You know, I lost my career. You know, I lost my livelihood. I lost my son, 2018, so I was 32 now, so what's that, 27? You know, 27, coming into the peak of my powers. You know, I finished leading wicket taker for Yorkshire in both white ball competitions the year before. Arguably, I wasn't at my best in 2018, but, you know, I'm not surprised I was going through this. And it was, I mean, it's a time I can't even describe. It was just so difficult because, you know, I was out of the house, not knowing if I'd come back to my wife alive. You know, there was serious, you know, how do I put food on the table? You know, I have from the age of 16 independently, you know, earned myself, supporting, you know, my family and everyone, and you know how. You know, that whole phase was like, how and what do you do? And, you know, just the support of my family was just what got, you know, for my family and my wife's family is what got us through. For me, you know, speaking out just came unplanned, but in a way that was better because, you know, for me, it was just like, I woke up in the morning, I didn't care whether I was going to get sued. I didn't care whether, you know, what was going to happen, whether, you know, legals and all that, just didn't care. You know, I woke up in the morning, whatever my heart told me, I just did it. And I hope, and you know, there's a lot of good bits around the next bit. I got the most amazing professional support anyone can ever wish for. I got it from Jennifer Robinson at Doughty Street Chambers, Paris Garcia, Doughty Street Chambers, you know, initially from a law firm in Bradford, you know, and that's another disappointing facet of it. But, you know, initially I got that support from them, you know, a PR firm in London. But my true support was from two journalists, George DeBell from the Cricket Info, James Butler on a Cricket Badger podcast. And these two people, because you know, you'll have covered these stories, there's a big thingy and then it dies. But through that die period, these people literally put their careers, everything on the line, and you know, they've suffered. So that support.
In what way they suffered?
I mean, James' works that dried up, you know, ostracized, and you know.
Because he supported you.
Yeah, absolutely. And George DeBell now, you know, fences put up at his house, you know, cameras installed because of the threats. You know, he's fearful of going to the Headingley Test match covering. He feels like he's lost his home in cricket. His colleagues, some of his colleagues, say in the nicest way possible, have basically taken the side of the racist, done it in a very malicious manner. And look, we've seen, you know, we know the publications, some publications, what they stand for and stuff. But you know, they've had a relationship with him. You know, they supported me. He hasn't supported me willy-nilly. He's seen all the proof. He's rang around. You know, none of them have done that. They've shown what institutional racism looks like, and he said that at the second DCMS. You know, it's the powers to be standing shoulder to shoulder and using all the tactics in the world to say, nah, you know, we're having none of it. And some of them, you know, are going to look back, and some of them are very well respected and high profile, and they've peddled lies, continuously peddled lies. And in the next phase, the way they treated Lord Patel, and I'm sure we'll get to that, has just shown that the biggest problem they have, and cricket has, and a large part of that press, and I'm sure I'll be attacked for this, and they can crack on, is they could not and would not take that a brown man was leading over them, or a brown kid has been heard. Some of them stood next to Michael Holding and, like, you know, gave all the superlatives out. You know, they won awards on the back of it, you know, of the back of Michael Holding or Every Rainford Brent, some of them. And the way they've behaved through the last 3 years, you know, is, and I know where it comes from, because they are petrified. They're petrified of what will land, because they know what their behaviours has been. And you know, I feel a bit of guilt for George. I feel sadness. He's been incredible strength, pillar. You know, I've been with him this morning. You know, he's saved my life. You know, he has saved my life, because I was carrying so much with me that I don't know how long I would have, as a human being, I would have been able to carry it without, you know. But he stood by me throughout, and you know, the way he's been treated by his colleagues, they know who they are. It just shows how big the problem is, and you know, that stems the big issue.